What's good, YouTube? Thank you for joining me for round two. Today, I'm going to be discussing higher education and graphic design. But before I get into the meat of this video, please like and subscribe. And if you have any design friends thinking about going to school or any that are currently in school, this is definitely the video for them. So please make sure to share it with them and tell them to subscribe too. Now, despite what the title of this video says, we're not going to be talking about if going to college for graphic design is worth it. Sorry, it was clickbait.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
YouTube told me to do it. But in all seriousness, going to college is not something that I can tell someone to do or not to do. I think that that's a personal decision. And I also think that college is not for everyone. And we should not treat it as if it is the natural next step for when you leave high school. I think that's a dangerous way to think about college. Honestly, it just depends on your preference and whether or not your economic, social, and cultural backgrounds require you to go into college. Again, a conversation for another time, but there's a conversation that I think is pretty lost when people are like,
go to college
or
don't go to college.
It's absurd. It's an absurd dynamic and it's way more nuanced than that. But I will say that as someone who has gone to college himself, gotten a graduate degree, and have taught in higher education, I feel uniquely positioned to have a discussion about higher education and how it relates to graphic design and how student designers can navigate. So this topic is going to be split up into 3 different videos. So today's subtopic is going to be one of the most controversial, but it is one that I want to go ahead and get out in front of because the school year is about to start for many of you, and I think it's really important to tackle this semester and your time in school with this mindset, especially if you're just now graduating from high school and entering college as a freshman.
Stop focusing on grades.
Stop focusing on whether or not you got an A, a B, a C, a D, an E.
Huh?
E's don't exist. Not in grading. Or an F. Grades nowadays have turned into something completely unrecognizable, and they start to encourage rampant mediocrity. And that's not good for the health of my field. It's not good for the health of any creative field. And it's not good for your success as a designer in the long run. I'm probably going to be cutting to the chase a little here, but I want you to, instead of focusing on the grade itself, focus on the material. Focus on the lessons that are being taught. What's the theory? What's the application? What do these things mean for the larger scope of the work that you are trying to get into? Do you understand what it is that you're being taught? And are you retaining that information? Because this is not high school. I would argue that high school needs to be taken more seriously than it has been. But barring that conversation, this is not one of those moments where you come in, memorize a bunch of stuff, throw it up so you can do well on a test and then forget about it later on. This is your career. You're trying to do this
for the rest of your life.
It does not make sense to treat this thing like it's just a natural progression of high school. And the mistake that I see a lot of student designers making, including student designers who are well into their junior and senior years, is that they are so focused on the grade that they forget that they're supposed to be learning things. There are so many studies and books that suggest that students often equate the success of their learning experience to whether or not they got a passing grade. And that to me is absurd. Grades in college and university are not just about regurgitation, it's about application. Do you actually understand this stuff enough to use it in your field? And what I've seen a lot of students, again, those upper level students do in circumstances where they don't make the grade that they thought they should, they start to ask the wrong questions. And when they start to ask those questions, that's when I start to understand that they are not actually looking at the substance behind the grade. They're looking at the grade itself. I had an experience where a student asked me to talk about their grade. They didn't quite understand why they got a B on something instead of an A, immediately I knew that student wanted a justification rather than feedback. And in that moment, I asked them, well, why do you suppose you did not get an A? Their response was really telling. First, they stumbled a bit because they did not expect me to ask that question.
Wow, that's a great question.
You had you could
Then they started to say, well, I did all the things. I thought that you liked it, blah. And immediately I intervened. Well, whether or not I like your work is irrelevant. I don't form my rubrics based on what I like and don't like. If it was that easy, I would not need a rubric. And so because I require a rubric when a student wants to discuss a grade, I ask them to go through it. They had every piece of feedback that they needed to improve their grade. They had every piece of feedback on how to grow as a designer, at least with regard to that specific project. What they wanted was not feedback. What they wanted was a justification. And that tends to be the issue, focusing on grades as a measure of academic currency. And if I sound bitter, it's because I am. Back when I was in school, I sound like a boomer, which was actually not that long ago, getting an A was almost impossible. And I also teach in the same program that I was a student in. Getting an A meant that you did exceptionally well. You went above and beyond. Not only did you understand the project and the materials, but you showed that you have mastery over both of those things, and you went over even what the instructor expected you to do. Getting a B meant that you did well. You understood what you were supposed to do. You started to master those skills. You just didn't go quite above and beyond. You may have done something that was expected. You may have done something that technically works, but is not innovative in its approach. If you made a C, it means that you've met the bare minimum of the requirements for that project, but you didn't really do anything life-changing. And maybe your technical approach was not as refined as it could have been. A D meant that you were off the mark. You barely read the brief, and you don't actually have mastery over those skills. You have a lot of practicing to do, and an F was insane. But I mean, I got an F. I got a few Fs in my time. Granted, I had to drop the class because financial aid, but eventually I would have to take the class again. And I would also have to understand that it was not my instructor's responsibility to make sure that I retained the information. Although it is their responsibility to teach it to me, it is my responsibility as the student to make sure that I'm getting everything that I need out of this class, no matter what. Tips to anybody who might not be passing a class: ignore your professor, study on your own. And when you feel confident about the substance, then you might want to talk to your professor if you're still not quite getting the grade that you're looking for. I want to back up a bit because I still want to hammer home the very important fact that grades don't hold the same kind of weight as an academic currency as they did even when I was a student. Consider this contextual truth. During the pandemic, everybody in higher education was forced online, including design classes, which required most of us to shift from studio-based classes, working hand in hand, being in the studio for hours, getting feedback from your peers, getting feedback from your instructors, all in real time, to an online platform where you didn't want to turn on your cameras, you were exhausted, you wanted to understand how you were going to socially connect when you were so disconnected from the world. And your instructors also seemed to be fumbling because we were fumbling as well. We were trying to find out how we could make the experience as effective as possible without you losing any of the necessary materials to be successful. And I'm sad to say, in my opinion, we failed miserably, not just the institution that I worked for, but instructors writ large. Many instructors nationwide reported showing a great deal of leniency when it came to grading student materials, understanding the pandemic and the contexts that came with that. There are studies that suggest that grades had been inflating over the past 20 some odd years, but skyrocketed during the pandemic because of that contextual grade inflation that needed to happen as a result of some of the social woes that we were all going through. But in my experience, when we returned to in-person learning after the hardest part of the pandemic, we never really shifted back to the expectations of rigor that we had during my time. In fact, the program that I worked for, I felt as though has started to take a nosedive in terms of its expectations for the students and the rigor expected of them. So many students got accustomed to getting exceptional grades for mediocre work. And a lot of the instructors that we had at the time felt a need to maintain that practice to keep morale high so that students would feel comfortable enough to stay within the program, even if they weren't demonstrating a level of professionalism or skill necessary to be successful in this field. Increasingly, there are these circumstances where instructors are being reprimanded for how they grade rather than students taking accountability for those grades. I realized that was happening when I got my first reprimand for a student not doing as well as they thought they should be. I remember this so clearly. It was my third semester teaching. I got called into the chair's office right before my class. Now, mind you, I was working full time, so I had to get off of my job early and come in to have a conversation about a student who was frustrated with their grade. Now, to give a little context, this student was frequently late. They rarely paid attention in class. They never had their work on time. They never did any of the prep work. Anytime they did do the prep work or homework, they would bring it in and it would look like it had been done 5 minutes before class started. And apparently they decided that information did not make them look good. So when they complained about not doing well in my class, they decided to tell another instructor who was a little more lenient. And that instructor came to me and talked to me like a human being. I'm just kidding. That instructor went to the chair and the chair came to me. The chair asked me still to go out of my way to help improve their circumstances. So I did, like a noob, and I sat aside an entire Saturday, sat in the studio for 3 to 4 hours, ran my lessons again, and the student, to their credit, they were understanding the material a little more. But their attitude never changed throughout the semester. Even though their grade improved on that individual project, they continued their habits. And when it was time to do other projects and show what they had learned, they were still not doing well. And it was that experience that opened the door to all of these subsequent complaints that were similar in nature. And while I started seeing in my class and in other classes, grades started to elevate, the output of the projects sucked. They were not good. They were also not things that I could expect for any of these students to put in their portfolio and show to a potential employer. And that is a dangerous thing, because not only does it ruin that particular student's ability to get a job in the creative field, but it also tarnishes the degree and the institution from which that degree was received. And that pain is already being felt. Employers are already saying that they're not satisfied with how the current generation of workers are coming into the work field unprepared. They do not have the communication skills expected of them. They are constantly late on deadlines and showing up to work. They're often combative, and they are always on their phones. Now, a lot of you will probably chalk that up to boomers being boomers. Okay, cool, whatever. But the boomers are paying you. Now, as someone who believes that work culture can be reshaped into something positive and should be more inclusive of a space, but I also think that it's worth noting that there are ways to be successful in the creative field and be yourself without being the worst part of yourself. Now, I am not suggesting that every student is going to be stellar when they leave. I was not. I did not have the technical skills to pay the bills. But I also had something that I see a lot of my students lack. I have passion about the work that I do. I love being a designer. When I went through my portfolio review my sophomore year, I failed the first time. If I did not pass that review, I would not have been able to get into my junior year. And during that time, my summer, I reached out to each and every one of the professors on that committee. I talked to them. I came up to campus and had conversations with them, even though I lived hours away. Asked them what I should focus on in terms of how I might improve, what they needed from me as a student, and how I could become a better designer. And I practiced and I redid every single project that I had to show in my portfolio review. And that was not a small number of things. And I also don't encourage being that neurotic. My point is, I'm not arguing that students have to be perfect when they leave the school. I'm not arguing that only the prodigies get jobs. That's not true. I am arguing that you should reframe your mindset, not necessarily to get the best grades, because those aren't really reflective of anything nowadays. I'm telling you to focus on the passion behind why it is you want to do this and what is driving you. I always tell my students that education, higher education, is an investment of self-love. You enter into college because you feel like it is the best way for you to show love to your future self. If the person at the end of this college experience is one that you want to be successful and one that you want to thrive, focus on gaining knowledge. Become an expert in the field. Don't just become a practitioner. We are in really uncharted territories now in 2025. AI is rampant. AI is encroaching on our field quicker than any other field out there. It is becoming more and more difficult for college graduates to get jobs, not because their education wasn't worth it, but because we have to go above and beyond to show our worth as a field. And it is not fair, but it is the reality that we live in. If you want to show that you are better than artificial intelligence, which you inherently are, again, conversation for another time, then it's really important that you do more than just learn the easy skills to get by. You need to challenge yourself. Stop running away from classes because you think they're going to be too hard. Stop running away from your
Fundamentals.
My goodness. If I have to tell another college senior to use a grid, I am going to lose my mind. I really hope that you took something away from this conversation today. And I hope that you join me for the next 2 installments of this video. I have a deep and unwavering love for higher education, and I have a deep and unwavering love for design. One of my goals has always been to help improve the health of my industry by helping the next generation of creatives. And while I might not be working in higher education, I still intend on fulfilling that goal. So I need for you, viewer, if you are going into design of any kind, whether it be graphic, architecture, illustration, interior, or anything in between, take it seriously. Understand that it is an extension of who you want yourself to be, and that is worth investing a bit of love into. Now, I'm going to get off my high horse because I am sweating. My apartment is 60 something degrees and somehow it is still hot. Probably all the extra fluff that I got. But thank you for joining. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time. Remember that good design means making good design choices. Show yourself some love and make good choices. Okay, it's hot. I gotta go.